Thank you, Barbara. I just would like to say, first of all, I love Memphis. Although I've never lived here, I've been here often, and I know the city in part through my relationship with the Hyde family, which has provided such extraordinary civic leadership to this community. I've known it through St. Jude, through family and friends who've received services there and benefited enormously from the kindness and the remarkable quality of that institution. I go back with Jane Walters, was a friend for a long time, and I haven't seen her recently, but I loved working with Jane. And there's a member of the Lupton family who lives here. She is a granddaughter of the donor of the Lyndhurst Foundation, Meg Gerber. So I've had many different points of entry into Memphis, and all of them have been richly rewarding. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you here tonight. We're going to ask each of the panel members to take just a couple of minutes and tell you sort of where they were when this happened in Hamilton County and sort of where they are now. And I will start with George Ricks on my left here, who is a member of our school board.
I mean, I don't have to tell them where I'm at now. So. Good afternoon.
You're in a lot of places.
Good evening, good whatever. I'm driving at, what, how many miles we drive? I'm still kind of shocked, and we got to turn around and drive back, and we'll be all right when we get back to Hamilton County. But my name is George Ricks. I'm gonna say it to you like I tell people. My name is George Little Man Ricks, and I like to be known as Little Man because that just carry a lot of weight with me. I'm a little guy with a big heart. I've been volunteering in the public school system in Hamilton County for over 40-something years. And when I like to let people know that even though I take a lot of credit for it, I got a girlfriend that I've been dating for 40-something years that also volunteered. I'm not ashamed to tell you all about my girlfriend, and that's my lovely wife, Maria. I like to start off with that because, again, she and I both have been volunteering in the school system for over 40-something years, mainly in the inner city schools. I have an undying love for children. I have a heart for the children in the school system, all school system, but mainly inner city schools is where we've done a lot of our work. At the time of the merger, I was part of the, I was in the city school system then. At that time, I wasn't supportive of the merger at all. I was advocating to vote for people in the community to vote against the whole merger. Again, because I was one of those guys that they had branded as a militant. You remember the days of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and they stuck with me for a long time. And it's hard to change when you kind of stuck in a zone like that. Over the times, I've learned to come to the table, sit down and negotiate with people versus being out there not wanting to come to the table, not willing to come to the table. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we all can make when we have the decision to make that affect young people in our community. But once you come to the table and sit down and start talking to people, and that's what I eventually did, it kind of changed my whole perspective on what needed to be done and what really needed to be done about what we was doing in Chattanooga. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I'm going to pass the mic down. But now I'm a member of the Hamilton County School Board.
And truly, George is the most faithful volunteer in schools, I think, that is in Hamilton County. You can find him almost any morning of the week greeting kids at Howard High School or wherever he can meet kids and offer them encouragement, support, and challenge. Truly a remarkable man. And I think he did not understate it. He was a vigorous advocate for the repudiation of this decision and is now one of our most creative school board members. On my right is Edna Varner. And Edna, tell them about yourself.
I'm Edna Varner. At the time Chattanooga Public Schools decided to go out of the school business, I was in a state of shock for several months. I had attended Chattanooga Public Schools. I was a Chattanooga Public School teacher, Chattanooga Public School principal. I went to college in Chattanooga. So I had been in Chattanooga Public Schools for about 25 years. At the time, we went out of the school business and started working on the merger. So I was in a state of shock because I just couldn't imagine what this would mean, but I felt it couldn't be good because what I knew seemed to be slipping away. I served on several committees during the planning. I worked for 5 years after the merger, and the year I was eligible to retire, I was offered an opportunity to work for a national initiative. So I called Dr. Register and said, I think it's time for me to run away from home because I had never worked anywhere else and I wanted an opportunity to do that. And what made that attractive to me is I didn't have to move from Chattanooga. So I have worked with a national initiative for 10 years, but during that whole time, I have stayed connected to the school system. I'm a consultant with Public Education Foundation. I still work with Hamilton County Schools. I tutor in an elementary school on Saturday mornings. I work with an organization that provides free test prep for juniors from July to October. I'm the immediate past president of the Community Foundation of Greater Chattanooga. So I really try to stay involved. I also will talk more about my experience with the merger and the experiences of people with whom I talk. But we expected the process to be really hard. We expected the transition to be really hard. It was really hard, but we had lots of pleasant surprises, and I'll talk more about those later.
Dr. Jesse Register, who was for 10 years superintendent of Hamilton County Schools, the first superintendent of the merged school district, and let you say a little more about how you got there and where you are now.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here. I was employed as the first superintendent and went to Chattanooga from North Carolina 10 months before the merger of the districts took place. I went in October of '96 to Chattanooga to do the last stages of planning for the consolidation of the districts, effective July 1st of 1997. Before that, I was superintendent in North Carolina, and I had done a career in North Carolina and had actually been involved in 2 mergers in North Carolina before I went to Chattanooga. It was a little bit like going home because I was born in Rome, Georgia, which is just across the Georgia line from Chattanooga, and had some family in the area, but wanted to move into an urban school setting also, so was very pleased to get the opportunity to go to Chattanooga. I went on a 5-4 vote, and the bet on the street was that I would stay 2 years, and I stayed 10. So I feel like it was a good situation. It worked really well. I'm still mad at Edna, though. Believe me. I'm about to get over it, Edna. I'll look forward to talking to you more about the experience that we had there, the planning and implementation.
Thank you, Dr. Register. Just a word or two about myself. I'm a teacher. That was my first career. I taught in a reform school and a military school and a boarding preparatory school for about 10 years in Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. So I've seen some of the most traumatized and disadvantaged children, and I've seen some of the most privileged children, and I've never seen a one that didn't need a good education. I had the opportunity to go to work for the Lyndhurst Foundation in the late 70s. That foundation had never invested in public education. All of its education resources had been invested in private schools. I came from the private school and led the charge within our institution to cease and desist funding all private education and devote all of our resources that were focused on education to the public schools. I lost a few friends in that process and never regretted a minute of it. one of our first major ventures was, in some ways, sort of a preface to a merger. We helped put together a public advocacy group to start a model public school in Chattanooga, now celebrating its 25th anniversary, the Chattanooga School for Arts and Sciences. It was the first school that was opened in the city, but open to children from the county. And it was a demonstration school about what it meant to truly set high expectations for all children and find diversity as a positive asset for the culture of the school. And the fact that it's in its 25th year, I think, tells you something about the response of the community to that vision. So I had worked with both the city and the county school system. I had actually taught some volunteer teaching in both the city and the county school systems before the merger took place. And as we come up on the merger, I just want to say, as we were coming over here, we realized that, in some ways we're the seniors now. We're all between, pardon me for saying, between 60 and 65 years old. So remember, this was 15 or 20 years ago in Hamilton County. And if our memories are a little foggy on some of the details, I ask you to remember something you were doing 20 years ago. See if you have a perfect recollection of it. We were the Young Turks then, and the rebels who were pushing in some ways against each other or for each other, but we were activists at the time, and I think we're active still. But you're talking to people who have reached a place of some perspective on this whole experience. The city school system was a shrinking school system in 1994. It was a system that was innovative, almost frenetically so, and all of its innovations undermined by a culture of low expectations. Personal view. And I find potential wherever I turn, and so this was a place that wanted to change, and this was a place that was trying to be better. But it was a place that was in many ways handicapped by its own long-standing culture. The county system was a growing system, increasingly prosperous, less rural, more suburban, and it suffered from a culture of self-satisfaction. Things were good and generally getting better, and not largely because anybody had to do anything different than they did yesterday. And so there was a great deal of why would we need to change disposition within the county. I don't know if either of those descriptions matches any of your experiences, but I think that was a prevailing reality in our community. The decision to pursue the merger literally came from two people on the city council who were friends of mine. And the city of Chattanooga had operated a separate public school system for 100 years or more. But the city had rarely put very much money into the city school system. But in recent years, it had begun to ask for more and more. And the city council was nervous about the long-term implications of that as a tax equity issue, where we're going to run all of the citizens in Chattanooga out of town because of an increasing tax burden. And there was a fear that the cost issue of the public school system, the public would never understand that public education was largely a county and state responsibility as long as there was a separate city school system. Now, those two people pushed this forward, managed to get a majority of the city council to vote with them. Then we had a long public debate and a difficult election and a narrow election, and the city voted to turn in its charter, relinquish its charter as a separate school district. And I can tell you now, I didn't say this to anyone then because my official position was above it all. But I disagreed. I just didn't think we could make it work. I didn't have particular loyalties to either side necessarily. I just wasn't sure we could make it work when I looked at those two cultures being so very different. But I had forgotten in some ways that I was part of a city that was flat of its back in 1981. We had the highest unemployment rate of any city in the South when we had the Great Recession of the early 80s. And Chattanooga had turned itself around in part by stretching its imagination, by looking to the kind of place we wanted to become rather than trying simply to analyze how we got where we were and whose fault it was that we were on a slide. A visioning community, a hopeful community, a community that had in fact achieved some major things that were difficult to do. So we had a can-do spirit, and I don't know why I didn't bring my can-do spirit to this particular situation. I was simply wrong because I think that our history of about 15 or 20 years of turning a place around is one of the reasons that we had the wherewithal, determination, and skill and capacity, in fact, to do what was surely and clearly the right thing for our community. A couple more details. The county did not want this to happen. The county superintendent was much aggrieved at the necessity of planning this merger when his constituents were not in favor of it. He didn't want to spend any money on it. He was a friend of mine, and he came to me and said, "This is the damnedest thing I've ever had laid on my plate." And he said, I need the Public Education Foundation to help us out. So I don't have any money to do any planning. And we wondered if you'd help us with some resources for this planning. And I'm not sure he knew exactly what he was getting when he asked for that, but it involved the development of a committee such as you have, but ours was somewhat less formal, in part because it was supported with external resources and sort of unofficially put together. But there were appointees and there were committees and there was a long-term planning process. And I think Dr. Register can probably speak to the details of that plan and how useful it was or was not, better than anyone on the panel. But let me tell you one thing you should probably expect as you go through this, and that is sabotage. And I'm just trying to lay the dead cat on the table. There are people who don't want this to happen, and you know that, and there may be some of you, I don't know. But some folks who don't want things to happen really don't want things to happen. And this is my favorite little example. A group of those who didn't want this to happen in Hamilton County invited one of these hired gun speakers, someone who just comes in with guns a-blazing and tears down whatever somebody wants them to tear down. They wanted to tear down this plan for merger of the school system. So this was a guy who was politically right-wing and evangelical, and he told everybody that this was a product of Hillary Clinton. I'm not sure I know how he got that, but there was many accusations thrown out there, all of which were just basically to discredit the process. But sometimes you have to be able to play hardball. Mostly I don't like to play hardball, but I know sometimes that's the kind of ball you need to play. And we figured out who was coming, and I studied his biography and knew before he got there what he was going to say because he had said it in every other speech. And so we had an op-ed prepared of the next morning newspaper that essentially sliced his message to bits and essentially made him appear to be the outsider who was attacking a good community that had done its work well. And so communications, strategic communications will be very important in keeping people from being distracted by some efforts that you will have at derailing this. My conclusion is this. I believe that Dwight Eisenhower, I think, is the person who first said this: plans are nothing, planning is everything. You're going to have to produce a plan. It'll be a document, and it'll matter. It will matter. It will drive events in many ways. But the most important thing that will happen is that you will have spent time planning and establishing a culture of planning and a recognition that that is an ongoing process, a never completed process. Any great school system, any great community is constantly in that active process of thinking ahead, figuring out how to do better. What you're about to do, the process may be just as important as the product because it will help define the culture of this community. How you do this work will define not just the educational culture of the city, but in many ways how the community itself wants to be. I also borrow another phrase from someone who said that culture trumps strategy every time. And what that means essentially is if you don't have the right disposition and the right relationships, you can have a plan of action and it just be the smartest plan in the world and it won't work. You have to get people's hearts right. You have to get the nature of relationships right. You have to establish a culture that trusts and works with each other and learns from each other. And if you do that first, then your strategies will pay off. Our community has unequivocally, undeniably, and irrevocably benefited from merging the two school systems. I was wrong to be against it in the beginning. I was right to put my head and heart into it after the decision was made. And I think everyone that I know in the school system will say, we're a better school system today, and our children are learning more than they were.
Okay, I'm old and I make mistakes. Where's Christy Ballard? Christy, I forgot to recognize Christy Ballard from the State Department. I don't want to break this spell because it's really important, but Christy is the General Counsel in Tennessee, and she is here to say that everyone is available to help us, and I think that's a wonderful statement. I wanted to say that. Thank you for your introductions and for your introductory comments. They're very poignant, and I'm sure we're going to begin to discuss it. Michael now is going to take the lead and kind of direct and guide our questioning. He will be questioning the panel on what he sees are some important things that we don't want to miss, and then when that is completed, he will facilitate our questions also.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I'm Mike Casserly. I'm the Executive Director of the Council of the Great City Schools. This session is really for you, and we are going to devote a little bit of time here until about 5:30 or so to having some Q&A and discussion amongst the panelists, and then about 5:30 or so, we're going to throw this open to you because it's more important that you get your questions answered than I get my questions answered. I have to say that I am very pleased as the director of my national organization to offer the resources of the Council of the Great City Schools and its members to this community as you pursue this important work. We put our expertise and resources at your disposal. As you probably have figured out at this point, there's no real blueprint for this work. There's nothing that has been done quite like this at this scale before, but the Chattanooga Hamilton example, it provides the closest example that we know of, which is why we had these fine panelists with us, because they are really able to draw the lessons of the experiences that they went through and articulate why it was and how it was their work proved to be so successful. I do believe that this collaboration between Memphis and Shelby County can be successful, will be successful and effective. As you heard, it will be in many ways difficult work as it stretches before you, but there is every reason for this community to be optimistic in what it is that you are about to undertake. So let's get to it. First of all, I'm just going to put a general question on the table for all of the members of the panel to address just briefly, and that is what you think from your experiences in Chattanooga and Hamilton County. What are the greatest challenges that you think that this commission is likely to face and this unified board is likely to face moving forward, and what would your advice be to this community for overcoming those challenges? And why don't we start here with the little man?
I just think first, you got to make it personal. The challenge, if it's a challenge, start with you yourself. You got to be honest with yourself. And you got to be truthful to yourself, and not only to yourself, to everyone around you. Put down those selfish type feelings. Put down all those feelings that your friends tell you to do, and do what's right for the kids. It's about the children. It's not about you. It's not about your political stance. It's not about your standards in the community. It's about the children, all children. And our education system, especially public education, promises a quality education to all kids. And that's what we need to be about. And I wouldn't look at it as a challenge. I look at it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to write, make history right. Because you're not going to be the one to judge this. It's going to be your children and your children's children. When they look in those history books and see what happened in Memphis. Did my granddad or my grandma make the right decision? Did they stand on the wrong side of history, or did they stand on the right side of history? So look at it as an opportunity, you all, not a challenge. But first look at yourself.
Jack?
Let me pass for just a moment.
Okay.
Well, thanks a lot. When I think back on the experience in Chattanooga, I can talk to some of the challenges I saw and encourage you to hit them head on. One of them was, I think people, because this was a shock to everybody, we didn't really know what it meant. We really didn't know what we wanted to accomplish through this. Some people were rushed to identify folks as heroes and villains. And once people started doing that, they really, I think, didn't feel they had to listen to the people who were villains. But in the process, when we were listening, I think we realized that some of our fears were common fears. What we wanted was the same thing. Everybody wanted children to get a great education. I don't remember anybody saying, we only want the children in our neighborhood to get a great education. We didn't know how to pull that off. But rushing to identify people as folks who didn't have an opinion I want to listen to was a mistake. I think we should listen, looking to understand where other people are coming from. And there are more commonalities among different points of view than we may think if we really listen. And someone said recently to me, and I resembled the comment, not waiting your turn to speak, but really listening to what other people are saying. I think a big challenge was a challenge easy to understand, fear of the unknown. And when we knew the Chattanooga school system had gone out of the school business, we had not worked very much with folks in the county, but there were just all these rumors. And when I look back, I can't even believe some of the things we believed at the time. They just don't make any sense. But, okay, our schools are going to be taken over. The children are going to be sit somewhere else. The city children are going to feel like guests. The county children are going to feel, and their families are going to feel they're imposed upon. We were making that up. And that was a challenge, how to address those fears early on so that people could do work that in their heart of hearts they wanted to do. I think the fear, we had funders at the time in Chattanooga Public Schools, and we were feeling some momentum around middle school reform, I believe, and our funders were always honest with us. And one of the things I remember they said to us in a meeting was, we feel that you may be so distracted you won't stay focused on what has to keep happening for children. And so the challenge is, we've got children who are in school every day, and all of us are expecting the best education possible for them. So how can we both focus on what we need to do in moving forward with this mandate, but at the same time still stay focused on our core business, and that is to make sure every child gets the best education possible. We had never done this before, so we all came to it not knowing. I mean, we lived in our comfort zone where there were things we knew how to do. I knew how to teach English. I didn't know what to do on a committee with business people and county people I didn't know very well to create something that was going to be in the best interest of all children. The real challenge was to come to a point where we had something that everybody could look at and say, this is good. I mean, that is a challenge, not to have winners and losers, but to come to a point when we can all say, this reflects our best thinking today. And I think, like Jack said, it doesn't end when when you put the last period on the plan. It has to keep evolving. As George said, we have to look for opportunities. And you have to look hard for the opportunities sometimes. And you have to ask hard questions of each other. And we did that, and we left some meetings some nights thinking, I don't know if this is going to work. But we committed ourselves to coming back and looking for opportunities, looking for common ground, looking for ways that we can work together for all children.
Jesse?
I'll be a little more succinct. First, let me say this.
Thanks. I'm getting it from both sides here.
This is how it starts.
Let me say this. Edna, George, and Jack were there at the outset of the process. That process lasted a couple of years, the planning process. And I just came in at the last part of that, about 10 months before the merger, as you know. But I want to echo something that Jack's saying that I think is very important for this committee. And we had just a few minutes before the meeting started to listen to Barbara talk about some of the steps that you've taken here, and I'll first want to look at this group, those of you that are here with name cards, and say that the formation of a group of people like this, those of you on the commission and the putting the two school boards together and having a new board identified is very good, very important first step. And the first thing I'd say is that you need to look inside. This is a little bit about what Jack was saying and a little bit about what George was saying, but it's very important. I think the great challenge is to develop that common vision, a common purpose, and let me use a different word, goodwill. You need to find those landmines, those political barriers, those people who might be barriers, and deal with those. Because as you go forward over the next year or so, building a common consensus is very important. And I would say that that'll be your greatest challenge. Let me jump to a couple of other points that I think are very important. Community engagement and support. You have a very big community. You have a very diverse community. You need to be getting your vision together. You need to be developing a common vision, but you also need to be leading the community. So work very hard at outreach and engagement and ownership of your entire community as you go forward. And then the third thing I'll mention is district staff engagement and support. Those are districts. And all of those people have personal stake in what happens going into the future. So I think you have to pay attention to the Shelby County schools and the Memphis City schools and those many thousands of people who work in those districts and keep them engaged in the process and informed in the process too. The last thing I'll say is that you should identify those community fears. Back to what Edna was saying earlier. Where are the fears that the community expresses, and I think you ought to find those, you ought to listen, you ought to do focus groups or community groups. I think you're talking about listening tours. Find out where those key fears are and get ready to address those first. The quicker you can answer those fears, the quicker you can dispel those rumors, the better off you are. Mike, I'll turn it back over to you.
Right. Greg, can you, in your experience in Chattanooga and in Hamilton County, I guess for all of you, were there early decisions that were made in the merger process that put the merger on a strong footing and made it easier for the merger to be successful over the long run? Decisions that were pivotal in moving the process forward, without which there might have been a different outcome to this? Or were there decisions that you can think of that turned out to be problematic and sent you down on a blind alley as such, and you ended up having to reverse?
I think one of the things this man is sitting at this table, and I hate to put him up on a pedestal, but I think the main decision that we made was bringing in a new superintendent, someone who didn't have a connection with anyone, didn't have a dog to bring to the fight, but he was neutral. And that was the man at the end down at Jesse Register, who came in with no fear, came in and made a decision that needed to be made. Took his time by doing it, looked at the whole situation, he listened to the community. He actually went out in the community. When I first met him at a community meeting that the inner city community, the African American community brought him in. And we had our doubts. And I'm not afraid to say what we said when he first walked in the room. That little white man, what he coming here for? And it was said. And again, you're going to hear these type of things from both sides. You're going to hear somebody say, if you bring a black candidate, well, that's wrong. You hear somebody bring a white candidate, that's wrong. But he came in with a true heart. And Jesse might not remember the message that he told us that day. And I think he said the key word is for all kids. It's for the children of Chattanooga, Hamilton County rather, that I'm here to make a difference. We was worried about the busing situation. We were worried about the teachers losing their job. We were worried about our principals. We were worried about all our friends that we knew that was working in the city school system. And where would they be? The fear was there. But I think the right decision was made to bring in someone who, he had some experience with it, and we didn't know, but they brought in the right person.
So that initial decision about your selection of a superintendent really proved pivotal in making the merger successful.
I feel that was a strong move.
Okay. Any other
Thanks for saying
thoughts on
that,
this
George.
one?
That was on down the road. I want to go back to earlier stages and before I got there, but it was obvious that community engagement had happened at a very high level. And the work of the Public Education Foundation and these folks sitting here to engage, and I'll say it now in hindsight, there were 2 votes. There was a vote, a challenge in court, and a second vote of the general population in Chattanooga. And I'll say now that I think that helped bring that to public attention, that issue to public attention, and was probably a good thing in hindsight, that there was so much attention brought to the issue before it happened that many people in the community were engaged in that process. And I think it bears fruit now that many people change their minds.
We have a couple more questions I want to pose to the panel, but I want to invite you to kind of queue up your own questions because we're going to turn to you here in just a minute. Jack, did you have any thoughts on this?
Just 2 quick points. One is that I think we had already learned in the process of revitalizing Chattanooga that if you open the process with saying what's wrong, you just never get where you want to go. You ask people, what do you want to be? What kind of community do you want to be in your imagination 10, 15 years from now? And people bring something other than their critical faculties. They bring their imaginative faculties to that task. And people's imaginations are usually so much more positive in spirit. So finding some way to start with what would this look like? Far enough out there that you can imagine it's a major change. And then the other thing is we had learned to look at facts without judgment. I mean by that you might want to, in this process, you take a look at, so how do you do transportation in your, how do you do transportation? You're not saying we do it better than you do. We're not proposing this as a strength or a weakness of our system. This is just how we do it right now. These are the facts. Then let's use that to inform that process of imagining. So what should it look like? And then you begin, if you decide we really want to make it the way it ought to be, you'll figure out how to do that.
I don't know how early this was in the process, but when Jack talked about what would a good community look like, I remember early on in our committee meetings being asked to think about what a good school system would look like, not what a merged system would look like, but what would a good school system look like? That was a biggie. And the more we planned, it was thinking about that, a system that serves all our children well. The other thing I remember, and this was connected with one of the fears was the day the merger happens, half the kids from every school would be moved to another school, forced to move. And what we thought about in the committee meetings was it would be great if people crossed lines to go city and county. We'd had some experience with a magnet school where people chose to come to an inner city school. County folks chose to come. Some of the wealthiest, the mayor's son, came to school with some of the poorest people, some of the poorest children in the district. Private schools came. So what if we started, because some people just we're different. Some people will take that leap of faith, and then some people need to see. And there are some things where I will take a leap of faith, but there's some things I have to see it first before I'll do it. So we thought, what if we could create some opportunities where people could choose to either to go to the county where they had never been, or come to the city where they had never been. And we had a great magnet school. I think we had only one at the time. And we talked about trying that idea of magnet schools to see if people would make choices. I was a teacher in our first magnet schools, and the first people who came were the leap of faith people. But they came, they loved what was happening to them, they saw what could happen when every student had a rigorous curriculum, when students got a chance to work with kids from parts of town they had never had an opportunity to be with. And then they spread the word that it was safe. And then more people came. But they came because they chose to come. And I think we made lots of believers that way, so it was easier for people to move. I don't care if it's good. If I'm forced to do something, I'm reluctant to do it. But if I feel I have some choice, and I think we were thinking about that early on, how to give people opportunities to choose to do something different.
Okay. I think Jack's advice here about visioning and Edna's notions about not thinking about this process about in terms of combination, but in terms of what you want, what opportunities there are for the parents, the community, and the children is the right way to think about this moving forward. But as I read the history on your merger, it was also clear that in a situation like this, it's sometimes hard to know what you don't know. And you were hit with all kinds of things that you didn't necessarily expect. How did you handle that? What were the biggest surprises to you in the entire process? Did you have contingency planning as part of this? How did you handle what you didn't expect to have in front of you?
It was a long time ago.
This is where memory fails.
This is where memory fails. Honestly, what you recall mostly was pleasant surprises. And you found common ground more easily than you thought.
In terms of getting a little closer to the time within the last year, there were several, and carrying across the merger after the first, there were a couple of things that really come to mind. And one thing I would encourage the panel to do here is to remove as many of those political barriers as you can, and to deal with those landmines. Even though I was there 10 months early, I stepped on a few, and it would have been great to have someone really help guide me through those as the leader of the new school system. You got to try to eliminate those. You got to try to take care of those landmines. I think that's very important.
And I think the statement I made, it wasn't trying to be looking at a race tone like black versus white, or how the black community felt about Dr. Register. It's about the trust value. And again, I man you when I first came in, and my first statement to you was, I didn't trust anyone. I wasn't going to the table. Didn't feel like going to the table. And I wasn't the only one feeling that way. A lot of people felt that way from both sides of the community. And once you start getting to the table, talking to the people, you start learning the person, and you start learning the individual. You say, there's some common ground here. We are alike. It's about the children. It ain't about me as an individual. It's not about what clique I'm in or what party I belong to. It's about the kids. And that kind of changed that whole perspective. But I think that's going to have to happen again. People are going to follow you all lead. The commission is first, and the school board is next.
The school board members in both of the old boards were not particularly in favor, not even up until the time of the merger. And I'll go back and reiterate again, it's really important for you to look inside first at this team that you're putting together to develop some common vision. The first action I had to take, the first meeting I attended 10 months prior to the merger was to go to Atlanta and meet with the Office for Civil Rights attorneys because the City Board of Education had filed an OCR complaint against the County Board of Education for pupil assignment practices. And so, and I want to highlight this because it also speaks to one of the great fears of the parents of the children that you serve, that you're going to move every child to the other side of the county, and that's just not going to happen. You know that, and we knew that then. But actually, what was happening in city and county in Chattanooga at that time is that the county school system had an open door policy, and there was white flight out of the city school system. That's the reason for the OCR complaint. But we had to deal with that early on. That was a surprise. And so I'll jump to advice on that. That might be one of the very tough ones that you ought to take on to start with. We didn't deal with that until after the merger of the two school systems, and we developed a comprehensive pupil assignment plan in 12 months after the merger of the school systems and implemented it the second year. And it was a choice program, and it didn't move everybody from one side of the county to the other, but there was a great deal of angst about that for the year preceding the merger and the year after the merger until the plan was developed and implemented. So I think that's something, when you look at your committee structure, that you might ought to consider taking on early on.
When Jack had this opening statement, Jack, you declared that you thought it was one of the best things that the community had done, and that not only the schools were better off for the work, but the children, their learning and achievement was better off for the work that you did. Does anybody disagree with that?
No, it's the truth. The data shows that there was great improvement and turnaround of low-performing schools, and the achievement data, if you'll look at it over the decade after, was up.
Okay.
And we learned that when people say all children can learn and all children matter, that really did mean all. It didn't mean we just need to be inclusive of kids who've often been neglected. It meant we need to be educating well all of our students. And that shook up some people who were complacent, frankly, in the county, who were coasting on their students' entering characteristics. They brought a lot with them from home. They were going to do pretty well on tests without regard to how innovative or creative or effective you were in teaching. But because we became one community saying every kid needs to be stretched as far as every kid can be stretched, I think that we've seen improvements in achievement across the board.
Get people to start working together, learning from each other, thinking about what I can learn from this school, what they can learn from me, so that it was reciprocal, not, we're the low-performing district, what can we learn from you? We know there's nothing we can put on the table. I remember a number of principals meetings where we were brought together, and at some of the first ones, it was like a sixth grade dance, city on this side, county on this side, and waiting for somebody to walk across the floor and say, hi, my name is, and I mean, actually, that happened. People started walking across the floor and just talking about, the different schools. I'm a middle school principal, you're a middle school principal. It was what Jack said before. Just talk about some of the things you're doing. Talk about some of the things you're doing. Let's come to visit each other's schools. Let's, do these kinds of things together. So I told you early on in my introduction that there actually were some pleasant surprises. I thought eventually this will feel okay, but it will be a long time. And one of the most pleasant surprises was it felt good early on. And it was because of those efforts. I remember a time, Dr. Redston probably doesn't remember this, when he looked at us, the principals, and said, you better care about every kid in Hamilton County, because by then we were the Hamilton County school system. you better care about every kid in this district, or you better be a darn good actor. And I thought, okay, it's about every kid. It's about what you can do for every kid. So there were lots of surprises in the way we came together to work. The biggest surprise was we weren't seen as the deficit district that had nothing to offer. We had done a lot of innovative things because we had to be innovative. Our kids were struggling. They weren't making great test scores every year. And the folks in the county, to their credit, I'm generalizing here, but people to their credit said, we're getting good scores, but we can do better than we're doing. And so we want to hear more about this kind of reform. Our funders who trusted us, they didn't trust us at first. They said, you're going to be too distracted. I don't know if we want to do this. We made a conscious effort to demonstrate to them that we could stay focused. We could keep our eyes on the prize, achievement of children, and do what we needed to do to come together as a new school district, not a takeover district. And so we made a conscious effort to do that. And the surprise was we both saw benefits much earlier than I personally thought we would. And again, you can look at some of the things that are happening in our district. I told you I work in other districts, and the things I can brag about our district, the coming together, the tough things we've taken on, and the hard things we've said to each other, and the hard work that we're willing to do. And we are not where we need to be, but we're feeling good. And I think, as I look back on it, the accomplishments we've made, we could not have made them working separately. As good as we were in different districts, and adults were working really hard in both districts, even in Chattanooga Public Schools, where kids were struggling. They come to school, the kids aren't the challenge, but they come to school with challenges. And so working together, I think some of the successes we feel good about and we can build on to get to where we really want to be are because we've come together to do it.
Let's open this up to the commission and your questions, because we want you to learn as much as possible from the experiences of the Chattanooga, Hamilton County folks. Yes, sir. If you could introduce yourself.
I'm Ernest Chisholm. I'm on the Shelby County School Board. Taught for Shelby County Schools for about 40 years. And I heard what you said a while ago when you tell teachers to do better. I don't know about Chattanooga, but in Shelby County, that won't feed the bulldog. You got to be there, and you got to point out things to them that they're not doing as they need to do to get education where the kids can understand it. I just don't, and I do hope that you people will come back and let's sit down and talk in smaller groups about what we know about Memphis City Schools and Shelby County Schools, rather than something that I admire you for what happened, because I don't believe we can just say to y'all going to do better, y'all going to do better. We're going to have some meetings. We're going to have some observations. We're going to have to come back and say, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. But first, the most important thing is you don't even understand the King's language. So that's the way I see Memphis and Shelby County. But the good things that are happening in both school systems are happening because the teachers, the administrators, and the parents, and all of them get together. And I don't want to build any fences right off the bat, but I do know for a fact that an 80-year-old grandmother can't raise a 12-year-old son or grandson or daughter. I know they don't have the energy, the ability, time, or anything else. So I'll encourage you. I hope y'all can come back and spend some time.
Well,
I'm happy to come back.
I'll react to that. There aren't any automatics. You can stay apart, you can merge. I think that's a decision that's already been made here. There is no automatic success. Just because you do it doesn't cause it to happen. It's hard work. I'm in Nashville now. It's hard work in Nashville. We're still trying. That's been a consolidated system for a long time, and we still have low performing schools and children who are in low performing schools, and so it's hard work, and it will be here. You have to understand that. But there is an obstacle that's overcome when you're together, if you can create a common vision and if the community comes together. There doesn't need to be a competition, an us and a them. It's about educating the children in this community. Is it one community? Is it a large community? Yes, but it should be one community on a matter so important as this.
Yes, sir.
In reviewing the doc, I'm John Smerly, and I'm a college president here at Memphis, and honored to serve on the Transition Commission. As I was reviewing the documents, there's one thing that struck me to be very, very significant, and that was the foundation funding that this process received. A couple of foundations getting together, Lyndhurst and Annenberg, to name a few. And given some of our audience today, I guess what I'd like you to reflect upon is how crucial was that significant funding? I was looking at $5 million or something thereabout. And where was that funding applied? Early on in the process, throughout the process, after the plan was created, to change culture, to pay for legal fees? I mean, how did that all break down? How crucial was it to getting this job done?
Well, I should probably ask Dr. Register, but from the perspective of someone who advocated for private investment in the schools, I can say very little of the money actually funded planning. I mean, it takes time to do planning. It costs some money to do planning, but most of that money didn't pay for planning. Most of that money paid for getting on with the business of doing what the vision called for. Annenberg Foundation was not interested in giving $2.5 million to do a 3-year plan. What they were interested in was a school district that decided it wasn't a sinking ship, it was a rising star. They wanted to hitch their wagon to a rising star. They wanted to know what in our plan would make us different from 100 other communities they could invest in. And we had something to show for it. We had something to show them that they were willing to invest in. So yeah, you need some money for planning. I don't mean to diminish that, but most of that money went for getting on with the job of doing what the plan called for.
You know, if I could think about what was missing, and Jack, you correct me, and Edna, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was my perception that the business community as a whole was pretty lazy in Chattanooga through this process. The foundation community was, and this community was the impetus for this change, and some of those elected officials. I think it would have been much better going forward if the business community had stood up and had taken a bigger role in this process. I think that's very important. When I contrast business community involvement in Chattanooga to where I am now in Nashville, there's a huge difference, and it's making a great deal of difference.
As we answer the questions, if I could invite the panelists to just pull the microphones closer to you so people in the back of the room will be able to hear. Yes, sir.
Jim Boyd. What can you tell us about the community engagement activities that you all saw as most successful? What were the, what was the character of those activities?
My opinion is that when people had the opportunity to work on something that was fairly concrete, manageable in scale, that they had an interest in, then they stuck with it. If you throw a huge, an abstract sort of proposition in front of a bunch of people and ask them to wrestle with that question, you sometimes just make them think, I don't belong here, I don't see how I can help here, I'm not sure this is going anywhere. So you don't want to turn people off in your process of asking for their honestly asking for their thoughts. So figuring out different places for people to connect is important. Different people will want to connect in different places.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I think that has to be very carefully planned and structured. You have to have good facilitation. You have to really know how to do that constructively.
Yes.
To get that community engagement and input.
And I think what happened in the meetings I attended was there was some information, education up front to frame the conversations. And then people who seemed to always come because they were very passionate and they had some things they wanted to say, and there was certainly an opportunity to say that, but also it wasn't a meeting where we got there and everybody vented and we went home. While we had some folks together, we really wanted an opportunity to have them think with us about what we were trying to do. And that went back to that, create a system that at the end of the process, people would say, this is good.
When you were devising your plan, how did you balance the need to be specific in the plan in order to capture the attention of the community against the possibility of hamstringing your new superintendent that may or may not have wanted to do some of the specifics in the plan?
I'll bet you haven't thought about that.
I haven't thought about that. The key question is, how soon do you bring the person to the table who's going to be the leader of the new district, the superintendent? My strong advice to you is to make that decision early. 12 months. I would next summer you need to name a superintendent or pick someone who's going to be the successor, and then involve that person. I accepted a lot of the planning that was done, but I also reserved the right to develop my own organizational structure. And I also wanted to have an opportunity ahead of time to be there and to engage the community in dialogue myself and to start engaging the staff in work. The detailed planning work was done during that 10-month period of time, and we had committees that involved scores of people from both districts. It was my opportunity to bring people together from both districts ahead of time to do a lot of the detailed planning, and I thought that worked very well. And Jack's exactly right. It's the process, not the product, that counts, because when you look back at the plans that were made, a lot of them weren't implemented, but it was the process of getting people together during that planning time that was really important.
The plan was never even formally adopted. I don't think anybody knew who's supposed to adopt this thing. But the planning process had made a big difference, and so it carried weight. And by the way, Jesse, if we had made that decision 12 months in the process, you would never have been the superintendent.
Hey, I'm just glad you didn't have a vote.
Oh, I would have been for you, but...
Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, David Pickler. I serve on both the school board and the planning committee. Dr. Register, you made a comment, and you've all talked about the issue of community engagement and developing, that plan to gain ownership and outreach in the community. I think, Andy, you talked about the fact that, when the vote took place and the city voted to give up the charter, that you were shocked. We have a situation in Shelby County where the people in the city of Memphis voted to give up the charter, and you've had the people in suburban Shelby County that were not part of the process. What suggestions do you have to this committee that we can reach out and try to engage the community that is divided because a portion had a voice in the process, another portion did not, to build ownership and engagement as we move forward?
So that was the same situation in Chattanooga, except neither side wanted the merger in Chattanooga. Although the general electorate did vote in the city of Chattanooga for the process, but the county school system, the people in the county did not want the merger to take place. So, we all know what engagement strategies are like. I think, and sorry for being redundant, but first you got to get your own act together, and then you've got to reach out and engage other people and develop that ownership and talk about that future vision. You've got to develop a different vision for where you want to be in public education in this county.
And there was some backtracking because I was shocked because I couldn't believe we voted. And at the time, I was an English teacher. I was teaching Romeo and Juliet. I wasn't keeping up with what was politics and so forth. I didn't understand why the county wasn't voting either. And so there was some educating after the fact to get us to understand that. And in terms of the engagement early on, I'm not sure what was happening specifically in the county, but I know there was a bringing together of people who would come together just to talk through it, because I can't remember anyone, obviously 53% of the people were for voting for it, but we were against it, the county was against it. Anyway, your question was about engagement. I'm not really sure what was happening in the county, but I know there was some bringing together of people to have some conversations to say, none of us were in favor of this, but now as we understand, the city can vote to go out of the school business, and it's a city decision, and the county was always responsible for the schools. But the city was chipping in money when the city decided to be a different district. And I learned all of that after the vote.
Mr. Pickler, 10 years from now, there'll be still people saying, why didn't the county get the vote? And people who don't want to understand something won't understand something. It is a bit of an oddity about the law that said the people of Memphis got to vote and people in the county didn't. And you're not going to be happy with that, so you wind up saying, I don't understand that. The most critical factor, I would say, in getting people in the county with the right disposition for this will be the voices of your elected officials. If your elected officials decide to lead and say, this is where we're going, this is why we're going there, this will be good for this community. They have the biggest bullhorns, and they have earned the credibility because people have elected them.
I believe Jack's, pardon me, Jack, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no.
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
He's the amen corner.
You've got to reach the local government. You've got to reach to the local elected officials here. The county commission, the city council, the mayors have to get on board. And that goes back to what I was saying about taking out the political landmines and barriers. You've got to deal with that. Don't leave it to a superintendent coming in a year or 2 years to do.
Good advice. Yes, sir.
But the biggest difference that we're facing is that you're asking us to stump out the dissent, and those who don't agree that this is here. And when we go out in the community and talk about the buy-in, they're still looking at the possible legal out. We have people that we work with that we want to be on the same page, but 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there wasn't a legal out. The buy-in had to be there. How do we make this work? Because this is what you have. Here, we have a suburban community that's still banking on, in my opinion, a legal out based on the law that's the reason we're here today. So again, I agree with you. Community outreach. I guess I don't really have a question unless some advice maybe of how do you stop out dissent when that dissent is banking on that we don't have to be a part of this consolidated system here after it's all consolidated.
That's why I said this is your greatest challenge as a committee. I think you have to deal with that as effectively as you can. The fact that your county mayor is sitting at the front of the room here is very important, and your Memphis City mayor, your Shelby County mayor, and those elected officials, and you who are elected officials to support the school boards have to step up and be leaders.
So were there people that you didn't bring to the table that you wished you had, or you brought to the table too late, and it affected the process?
Sure, but I don't remember who they were.
Yeah, I think the comment I made. I think one missing contingent, and maybe it was there before, but the business community did not step up, and I think that was a mistake. The foundation community did, but the business community did not step up, and I think the business community needs to be reached.
And I think they thought they were stepping up because they served on some committees, but no leadership. No leadership. Will you call on this person?
This guy
I
right
can see your neck.
here, this young man right here.
And I think Jack mentioned that we needed to give people things that were concrete, manageable, and also multiple opportunities. But could you give a specific example of one or two of those things, so that, I think that would be helpful to build on those kind of ideas.
Yeah, I may choose exactly the wrong example for this community, but let me say that I think one of the things that dogged Dr. Register for most of the time he was there was that we did not resolve the difference between the two transportation systems in the city and the county. Now, it's astonishing that something like that can be a lingering, festering difficulty, but in the county, school bus drivers own their own buses. In the city, they were contracted. And there were deeply committed people to each of those arrangements. And the school bus drivers were and are a major political presence. They are some of the hardest working people in elections that you can find. We did not do the hard job of saying, how should this be done? Now, obviously, the superintendent and the school board ultimately make that decision, but we really didn't say, what would this, under the best of circumstances, how should this be done? I went ahead and said it because you hadn't said it yet.
Yeah, but, and so I'll generalize on that. That's one of those formidable political barriers that was persistent and stayed in the way.
I was talking, but in terms of community engagement and getting ownership in it, other than just talking, because that's the only example I think. And then you mentioned that you didn't resolve this, but you said to give people some things that they could complete. And so was there something you did early as a community that started to draw people together that you could look at as a success and then build on that?
We did have, I can't remember how many committees, but we had lots of committees that were working on different sections. Not that everybody was working on a section of the plan and we put it together, but there were lots of committees of people working on ideas to inform the plan. We had a steering committee, and we had lots of people on those different committees. And like I said, I can't remember how many, but that was an opportunity to do more than just come to a meeting and say something. Lots of people from the community were actually developing ideas that would inform what became the plan. I'm not sure what else, I can't remember what else we did.
I think, because again, we can't speak for what was happening in the county. It was the partnerships that you formed also with the local organizations that was in the community. You have to form some type of partnership. For instance, with the fraternities and sororities and the NAACP, or whatever organization, the local community, like you live in a housing development, you had a spokesperson for that community. In Chattanooga, we have a lot of communities that's organized, and to build a type of rapport with them and then go in and not come in saying we're the one hosting this meeting. You give them the opportunity to co-host or host the meeting and bring you in to talk to the community. A lot of times we try to organize things, we want to say, well, we're the expert at it. So we know what's best for that community. So we're going to go in here and we're going to talk to them. And when you get there, they're already mad at you because you think you know more than I do. I know my community. You don't know my community. And that works both ways for the county and the city. So again, building a partnership, and sometimes get people from the community to go with you to other communities, to meet each other, to talk to each other. A lot of that was happening in Chattanooga at an early pace. Again, that's how I got involved in some of the things, and again, it started kind of easing how I felt about a lot of situations. Because if you don't build a rapport with the community and let them take some lead in some of the meetings that you're going to have a host, it's not going to work.
Yes, ma'am. And over here.
Thank you. I heard one of the panelists say
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Frida Williams on the Shelby County School Board. I heard one of the panelists say that they didn't have to submit the plan to anybody once the plan was finalized. Was that correct?
It was an oddity about how it came to be. This county superintendent literally came to the Public Education Foundation and said, I need help with this. We weren't authorized by the county school board. We weren't appointed by public officials with anything like the degree of clarity that you have here and officialdom that you have here. It was more informal in nature, though people from various constituencies were clearly placed on the committee by different people who put the committee together. So at the end of the day, it was a kind of public expression of a vision.
So how did you agree on the final plan? Who was it to say, this is it, let's move forward with this plan?
Worked its way up through committees, and drafts were approved, and final documents were voted on, and
There may be a little confusion about what type of plan we're talking about, because this was a planning document that led to the decision to consolidate. The plan that was submitted, the state plan, was developed and submitted to the Commissioner of Education.
Oh, right.
We developed that plan in the last year.
Yeah.
All right. That's what I was
Yeah,
asking
yeah.
about.
Right.
All right.
We're really talking about
So
two
there are two
plans.
separate plans that you have. All right, thank you.
Better to have one. That's an improvement you can make.
The other was Plan B.
Okay, hi, good afternoon, evening, I'm Stephanie Gatewood, Shelby County School Board. My question, you talked about transportation, and there's a huge issue about transportation, which of course we know that we have the same issue as it relates to Memphis City or Shelby County transportation. How did you overcome that issue? And did you ever overcome it? And when did you start seeing successes?
Let's talk about two or three different facets of that, if we may. The first year after the consolidation, we developed a pupil assignment and zoning plan that was adopted and approved. It was a good plan, and essentially it was a plan that had zone schools and choice schools. Magnet schools, a number of new magnet schools, and zone schools, so that every parent had an opportunity to choose whether they wanted to attend a new zone school or whether they wanted to apply to a magnet. The issue that Jack's speaking of is ownership of buses, and a political group of people, the private contracted bus drivers, had about 100 buses in the school system. The city school system owned the other half of the transportation system. And what we neglected to do was to consolidate those. We let those private contractors continue to operate. And that stayed with us and was a thorn for the better part of 10 years. That's phased out there, I think, now. And so, and it was a problem and I'm not sure that there was a political will to change that. In fact, I know the county commission would not have approved dissolution of those private contracts. They would not have approved that. So it was a problem that we couldn't solve right on. But two or three different components there. The plan, the pupil assignment plan, was approved and adopted, and the OCR complaint was closed. City board against the county board, and we implemented the plan the next year, and it's still in effect. The same plan's still in effect.
Okay, so I have two final questions. The first one is...
Before you ask that question, let me bring you up to date about the buses, because we still have a contract. We have a contract with a private bus service, and we have a contract with some private bus owners. No new owners could come in. It's phasing it way. It's phasing out. I think we have maybe about 40 independent bus drivers now that's still up under contract. We just got through negotiating another contract with them. But
It's a great example of dealing with your problems.
But again,
It
we
really is.
Grim Reaper will ultimately solve this problem.
Don't avoid them.
Why don't we go to, one more question?
Okay, one more question. Then my final one is, when you identified the last plan that you talked about, did you take it back to the community prior to and kind of give them an update, or were they able to have feedback
The zoning plan?
of the last plan that you talked about, the consolidated plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Barbara?
If you can deal with that, early on, it's to your advantage to do that.
I have a question for you. Of course, we are operating somewhat differently in terms of having our commission comes through state law and state statute tells us exactly what we have to do. And it seems like as you're talking, when we think about, I mean, there are two different things that we're looking, I mean, there are a lot of different things we're looking at, but we're looking at kind of the business operations and those kinds of things. And then we're looking also at the educational services. And it seems that on the one hand, we want more, we want the two to be more when it comes to what's offered for children. We want to really, instead of looking at just what's good here and what's good here, but what can be best. But also when we look at the services, intuitively, we think that when you merge, then you can kind of reconcile duplication of services and you can find savings and you can do those kinds of things that allow you to spend those dollars on other things. Can you, I mean, I always say that disappointment is the difference between what you think you're going to get and what you are going to get. So we might need to be realistic about that. Can you tell us?
Absolutely. So you will gain efficiencies, but the question is either district adequately funded now?
And when you were as superintendent, as you were thinking about this and as the community was thinking about merging some of these business services and operations, was there a point where at the outset you developed a set of criteria by which you would decide, a set of decision rules, a set of principles, or was it more ad hoc than that?
It wasn't ad hoc, but basically, I'll try to make this a short answer, but basically, that was a part of the planning that I did in the year that I was there prior to merger, and I put together committees, task forces that addressed each of those areas of concern, and they were co-chaired by a person from the city and a person from the county with a planning team. And that's a good approach for dealing with the details there, with a big exception. And here's the big exception. The financial plan is very important. One of the problems that happened, one of the great challenges that we had is that the county commission never came around to being in support of the merger, the majority of the county commission, and there was not a tax increase for years. There was no increase in funding for years in the school district, and the city funding had a sunset, and it sunsetted, and it wasn't continued, the additional funding that came from the city school system. So I think it's really important to develop a long-range financial plan. How are you going to fund it? How are you going to fund the consolidated system? What role does Memphis City play? What role does Shelby County play? And to come up with a good plan for that. And Barbara, I think I heard you say before the meeting that you do have a subcommittee for that. The more of that work you can do now, the better off you are.
But never tell the community that they're going to save money through merger.
No.
It didn't happen. It won't happen. It never has happened. Don't build up that expectation. Yes, there will be efficiencies,
So the
but
goal is not to save money, it's to have a great school.
that's
correct.
exactly.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Katie Stanton, and I'm on the commission, and I worked for Shelby County Schools for 40 years before I retired. And I am very concerned about our employees, and I know that there is a lot of fear out there. Since I'm from Shelby County, I've talked to more Shelby County people than Memphis City people, but I'm sure that the same fear is with Memphis City people. How did y'all deal with that, and how did you reassure your employees? And how did you reassure them that you really are going to pick the best practices from both systems? Because just as the transportation, there was a big difference. I know there is a huge difference between so many of our departments, and I'm sure there's good and bad in both. How did y'all deal with those issues?
Well, Edna might be a good one to address that from a school-based employee standpoint. That's where your thousands of employees are. And the bottom line to that is you're still going to have the same number of children, and they still need the same number of teachers. You do have efficiencies that you can gain by good planning in central administrative services, and we had a group of people that I pulled together to develop an organizational structure, and everybody in both systems had an opportunity to apply, and we told everybody in both systems that if their particular job went away, we would give them opportunities for other employment in the school system. Example, a central office curriculum coordinator could become a principal or an assistant principal or a classroom teacher. There was at the time, and I don't know what it is now, I haven't seen it, but there was at the time a guarantee for employment for certified employees, and unless it was a RIF. We did not have to RIF people. There were jobs that were changed. Obviously, if you've got an assistant superintendent in one system and the same position in another system, you're not going to have two. The approach that we took was to completely restructure. There's an opportunity. I want to make a point here that I think is a really good one. There aren't many opportunities when you can change a culture. And I'll look back at Hamilton County and Chattanooga City, and I'll tell you where there were some bad features to the culture that existed, the organizational culture in those two school systems, and there is an opportunity to create new when you form a new organization. It's just like a merger of two businesses. You have an opportunity to create a new organizational culture, and that's an opportunity that you need to take advantage of also. The two unions merged. The two unions, the Hamilton County and Chattanooga Public School Systems unions, developed a merger plan and merged the year before the district merged, and it worked very well.
Was that process their process and not a outside commission's process?
Yes, it was.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm Louis Beck from the Transition Planning Committee. You said that in that vein of restructuring, you said you had an opportunity to restructure to impact the culture, correct? So that means you looked at both systems and decided that what was best for children, you always said that all night, was best for children. So when you restructured, did you see the impact of the restructuring reflected in the culture of both? That's the first question.
Say that again.
Once you restructured, did you see the impact of your restructuring? Did it impact the culture of both groups coming together as one, or what?
Let me define culture, organizational culture, attitudes and beliefs of the dominant group of people in the district. You know, the great majority of people, the attitudes, beliefs, and resulting actions of people. And so the culture did change dramatically in the system, but it doesn't change overnight. Remember some of those culture meetings we had? You know, you're talking about changing attitudes and beliefs of people. You're talking about changing the attitudes of white people toward black people in some circumstances, and so that takes time. But you have to be very persistent in dealing with that, and that is a function. If leadership doesn't want culture to change, it will not change. So this leadership has to expect a different culture. You have to determine what you want. You do that through vision, and your new leader, whoever it might be, your superintendent, that culture, that development of culture has got to start at the top, and it's got to permeate the organization. It takes a while to do that.
Last question, disagreement. How'd you guys deal with disagreement? When you actually were planning on your committees and commission, how'd you deal with disagreement? Did you walk away frustrated and come back 2 days later and say, God, let's kiss and make up, or did we come at it?
It was a consensus building committee structure, and sometimes someone, and it was usually me, in the last stages of planning, the detailed planning, was that said, no, we're going to do it this way. But a lot of conversation and communication about that. I'm at a different place. I'm talking at a different place from where you are now, because I think you need to do everything you can to build consensus, and you need to build it around a common vision.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if you faced this, but we have a new law in Tennessee that allows for the 5 smaller towns in our county to separate and create their own school district. How do you see that impacting this effort?
I think, I'll be right out front with that. I think it's dysfunctional. And I look at some of our neighboring states and see how dysfunctional it's been, particularly to our south, Alabama. And you got to say that that's not productive. But you have to deal with it. It's your reality. And I can't really tell you how to deal with that, except to say that you need to win people over.
Thank you.
We did not face that situation because this process was a little bit lower profile process, and so the state legislators.
The state legislature was not interested?
The state legislature didn't give a flip what we were doing. They didn't, they just weren't engaged in the process, and obviously yours became engaged right away.
Our own legislators.
Right.
Yes.
Right, became engaged right away, and so, I mean, this question has already been addressed by Q. There's an opportunity for people to opt out at the end, and so that always affects kind of the way you go about the process. But I think you should comment. Go ahead.
Well, I wasn't really going to comment.
Okay. All right.
Why don't we go to this?
I think that gentleman wanted to.
Since I did ask that question, I guess I was going to follow up. What advice, because Superintendent Racer made the comment that you have to stomp out the dissent. You have to come together around a common goal. Obviously, the transition team has come up. Their common goal is how do you transition into one consolidated system. But as a board, policy-making power, with board members who may be for or against, what has been, which is the case, which is we have one system. How do you what advice would you give us on how to come together and around a common consensus of hey, of what's best for the children again, which has been a common theme all night?
It's hard work. But let me encourage you not to think so much about stomping out opposition as winning opposition over. The better your plan, the better your vision, the more people you get on board with it, the greater chance of success you have.
It made me think about a song about obstacles being in the way. You can go over them, you can go under them, you can go around them, but you don't let them stand you still.
I want to ask my question, please.
Oh, can I just comment on that before you ask your question? I remember one of the things we started doing before we actually had to come together was we started coming together. And so some of the unknowns were addressed because we didn't have that option. Nobody could opt out. So we started coming together. It's like you go to a school and it's a low-performing school. The day you all get there, you have to decide we're a good school and we're going to start doing what good schools do. So we started doing some of the things that a new school system was going to do, having joint principals meetings, having joint professional development, instead of working on a plan to see if people would like it, and then at the stroke of midnight, we all came together. We started coming together before, and maybe some crossing lines, looking at things, having some unknown fears addressed. I don't know if it will make a difference, but it couldn't hurt. Sorry, sir.
Yes, no problem. My name's David Reeves. I'm with the Shelby County School Board. I was looking at some of your numbers here. So in '97, you had an enrollment of 43,000 students, right? This year, you have an enrollment of 40,000 students. Now, I'm assuming over the course of the past 15 years, Hamilton County has had some growth, correct?
We got 42,000 now. We're going back up.
Okay.
That's some. I'm on the school board. We just got our new statistics. So
43,000 down to 42,000 over
Yeah.
15 years.
Yeah.
Has Hamilton County grown over the past 15 years?
somewhat, but I can tell you what we're seeing the growth. We're seeing the growth, and it might have a lot to do with the economy. We built some new schools in certain areas, and we seen students come back from private school enter into the public school system.
I'm looking for total population of Hamilton
And the
County.
population has grown. Because, again, you look at our education system is making a difference. New businesses begin to locate in our system, so we bringing new people in.
I don't understand how it can be doing great if you're actually dropping in population over the past 15 years, where are your kids going? Are they going to private schools?
Again, you can look at those numbers, what you're looking at.
Sure.
And you can twist them any way you want to twist them.
I'm not twisting your
saying-
numbers, they're
saying
facts.
I'm not saying you're trying to be negative.
I'm not trying to be
But
negative, but this is what you provided.
I'm saying they can be twisted. Anybody can look at them and twist it any way they want to twist them. But I'm here to say that our public school system under merger is doing a lot better than it was at first. Yeah, you had the flight, but now you begin to see a turnaround in that flight. In the last 2 or 3 years, we brought in maybe 500 or 600 new students last year, and the same thing this year. And our growth, believe it or not, has been in the elementary school system. So we said, I mean, you're gonna have that when it happens.
Sure.
It's gonna be some people that's gonna leave the system. You're gonna see a lot of people, but I guarantee you, if you stick with it, it's gonna be better for the city.
There was a lot of,
Shelby County.
flight right before and right after merger, because that pupil assignment plan wasn't in place. And the numbers dropped to well below 40,000. In 97, I think it was 98, I think it was down about 38,000. And quite frankly, that 40 and 43,000, I think, were inflated numbers, because there weren't that many kids in school to start with there, because of per pupil expenditures and two systems vying for funds. And I'm being very honest with you, I don't think the numbers were accurate.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, I like to deal with right numbers. I mean, you know, it's good.
But George is exactly right, and you did have a lot of fear of that and flight away before and after merger at the outset, and then it's been growing. Chattanooga's not grown that much in population. It's grown some, but you see a greater growth in the greater area.
I think one of the other points from the panel was that student achievement and the overall well-being of students is better today, regardless of what the
And the issues we've confronted, I think confronting them as a unified school district has made it easier to confront them.
Let's get the question here from this gentleman.
Hi, I'm Raphael McInnes of the Shelby County School Board. When the consolidation plan, I guess, was put together, was success defined initially, and if so, how was it defined, and what were those factors that you could look back and say that this was a successful consolidation?
The plan that was submitted to the state was a technical plan, presentation of how it's going to happen. There wasn't a vision in there. There probably was a mission and vision statement, but there wasn't a visioning process that did that. It was a technical document. In the PEF document, that was the document that had more of a vision of what the community would like to see in the school system.
Okay, we're going to be wrapping up in just a minute. I want to give each member of the panel a minute or so to say last words of encouragement to this commission about the work that you are embarking on. Edna, though, you mentioned about the notion about kind of crossing lines and working together on various issues. It occurred to me that one of the things that neither of the current school districts, Memphis or Shelby, has had to do, but will need to do because of the state's adoption of the Common Core standards, is to work together on how to implement a new set of expectations for kids. And here, in many ways, is an excellent opportunity for both communities to merge together and work on behalf of their children jointly to implement those Common Core standards and raise expectations for all kids in the community. Is there any last burning question from any members of the commission? Okay, one last question, then we'll go to final points.
Diane George with the Shelby County School Board. Did y'all give any thought to decentralization? We have such a large amount of students here, and did y'all give any thought of decentralization to help it to be more community oriented? Because some things would be that maybe one policy would not work in one area of the community, but would work good for another area. Could you give me some explanation if y'all even thought about that? Thank you.
From my point of view, no. We organized the district, Jack. I don't know if that was a conversation. I doubt it, but I don't know if that was a conversation from PDF or not.
It actually was. In fact, there was a significant debate about the degree to which you grant autonomy to individual schools and the degree to which you have a system that's carefully coordinated and unified. And I think we saw there's a reason for being attracted to either one of those. You can hold people accountable more when they get to make the decisions of how they're going to do things, and the adaptation to local circumstances is better. But on the other hand, if you don't have a centralized purpose, kids move around a lot. Kids move from one school to another, and if they wind up encountering vastly different circumstances from school to school, you haven't necessarily done them a favor. So it's a hybrid of the two. You've got to figure out what things need to be centralized and what things need to be decentralized. It's not one or the other.
Yeah, I have to say there's a number of major school systems across the country, urban and non-urban alike, that use a blend of models, and how you answer this question has been answered already by a number of different communities in a number of different ways. And this commission might want to take a look at how other large communities have kind of reconciled those issues. I'm going to give each of our panelists about a minute for any last words of wisdom or encouragement or advice to this commission as we close out the evening. So, Jack, do you want to start?
I thought when I came here that I was going to say I don't envy you. But after this conversation, I would say I envy you.
All right.
I envy you the great opportunity you have here, because I can assure you that no school is performing at the level that it could. There is never perfection, and we should also always be aspiring to something better. And this gives you a wonderful context within which to do that. So I envy you.
George? Thank you, Jack.
I just want to say thank you, first of all, allowing me to be here among this group. I feel so comfortable in this room because I feel positive, nothing but no negative vibes coming in this room for some reason. Because I feel that you are going to do the right thing, and you are going to rewrite the history of Memphis. And when your children read in the history book what my people did, they're going to be proud of you. So continue to do what you're doing.
Ed?
I envy you. I wish I had that. I really do. When I think about our process and what you have in place, I wish maybe you had gone first, and so we could learn from you. But you have a lot of things figured out that we didn't have figured out while we were going through this. And I would encourage you to take advantage of what you've got in place and the opportunity it presents for you to do what you set about to do.
So I looked back at all my notes to see what I'd left out, and I left one or two things out. But before I make those points, I'd like to say that I think you have great first steps here. I think you had I get to go home in a little bit. I get to leave the county, so I guess I can say this. But it looks to me like the plan that the judge came out with was a pretty good one. And I think you've got good first steps. And I think pulling this committee together and having Barbara as chairman is a great start. I would encourage you to finalize those governance structural issues that are still hanging. For example, that issue that you talked about of do we decentralize, do we try to divide it into parts? That's a political decision. That's a big one. If I were superintendent here, I would want to organize the administration. You don't need to get into the weeds like that. If you hire somebody early, I would want to develop that structure, but for the big political issues, you ought to deal with that and get it out of the way. I noticed in the plan, and I'll just state my ignorance here, but I noticed that you have 7 school board members that will be seated in the final analysis. And the question I'd raise is that enough? And it seems like that's a hanging issue for a while. Is there any way to resolve that early on so that you know what that governance structure looks like as you go forward? And I would encourage you to address that. I wish you the very best.
There's probably,
We'll be watching.
yeah, there's probably one other reason to address the governance issues too, and that is many of the leadership and operational and instructional issues can't really get resolved until those governance issues get resolved. Could I get a round of applause for a terrific panel?
But you know, folks, no one ever said this would be easy. It's not going to be easy. I recall when I was interviewing my appointments to the transition board, I said this will probably be the toughest part-time job with no compensation that you've ever undertaken. And I think that for our first 3 or 4 weeks, we can agree it's going to be tough. It's going to be long. It's going to be arduous. There's going to be some disagreements, but that's the way it goes. We know what we're facing. Yeah, I made several notes here, and not necessarily in any rank order, but just very quickly. You know, we're not that unique here in Shelby County. The issues that we're facing here have been faced by other urban areas across America, and they've been dealt with. And I've never seen a challenge in Shelby County. Never have I seen a challenge in Shelby County that we have not been able to conquer. And we're going to conquer this. We're not unique. We're not some island in the middle of the ocean. Many of the things that you all have talked about are things that we already know we're going to have to address. We're going to have to deal with. And that's going to be the challenge that's ahead of us. So I made the comment here, we're unique in some ways, but I think there's more similarities than we probably know. We're not without precedent. Challenges. I particularly made some notes here on challenges, getting people to listen to us. And, you know, we've talked about that in terms of how can we engage our community. And I think that is going to be one of our greater challenges, is how can we devise a system that really reaches out to all the constituencies in our community. The unions. How are we going to deal with the unions? How are we going to get them engaged in the process? You mentioned the district employees. You know, that's one of those things that maybe we haven't thought about too much. But there's a wealth of information that our district employees have, both in the old county system and in the old city system. We've got to listen to our employees. Municipalities. We have 7 municipalities here in Shelby County. And we know just from the events of the last few months that there's some differences in opinion out there. I think probably from where I stand as a political leader, looking at the challenge ahead of us to really get our political leadership in this community engaged in a positive way is going to be a significant challenge for all of us. Now, all of this is kind of wrapped up into the community engagement process. But in some of the political leaders that I've talked to that are considering the legal option, even they have said this is a viable option. We've got 2 options. Consensus. I don't know that we'll ever gain total 100% consensus, but it should always be our goal. You know, you hear the phrase applied to athletic exercises, to any type of fierce competition, that you never, ever, ever give up. I think we've always got to work toward that consensus. It's so important. We have had, over the last year, when I was running for mayor last year, one thing that I was told is that, Mark, when you become mayor, expect the unexpected. Well, I haven't been disappointed. There's been a lot of unexpected. But that's just the nature of our society. We are going to have things come up. We're going to have challenges that are facing us. How we got where we are, we can talk about that all day long, about whether it was a wise decision, whether it was an unwise decision, did we approach it the correct way. But the reality of it is we are where we are, and it is what it is. And now we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity that not too many urban areas have, and that is to create something that's brand new. And folks, if we look back on our history, it wasn't that long ago that we changed radically our city government back in the early 60s. And we had people in this community that stepped up and made it work and created something better. We've changed our county government in a very progressive way in the last 30 years for the better. We have an opportunity again to create something new and make it better. And I think what I take away from this more than anything else is to see the positive attitude that you all bring to this discussion, and how some of you are on one side of the issue and others on the other side of the issue, but now you're standing together. And I think we have something to look forward to. Can we look back in 15 years with smiles on our face, like this panel up here, and say we're better for the effort and we did improve? I think we can, and I look forward to that. So let's roll our sleeves up. Let's work hard over the next 10 months. Barbara, your hair will probably either change or fall out.
There's a remedy for that.
But I look forward to being a part of it, and I think we got some great leadership. Barbara and Fred over here. Fred's just an old veteran of the school system. I say old man, I said veteran. We've got some good veteran leadership, experienced leadership, and I think we've got a community that's willing to help. It's going to cost us a little money, and hearing some of your observations about that, it's kind of interesting. I might want to talk to you about that later. But, you know, quite honestly, the response that we have gotten from the community as it relates to finances, as it relates to rolling up the sleeves, has been very positive. So it's going to cost a little money, but we're going to raise it, we're going to make it happen, and we're going to apply it correctly. Barbara, thank you. Appreciate it.